بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to Islamic Oasis Live. Alhamdulillah, today we're very honored to have our dear sister Alia share her story about accepting Islam. Some of you may know, inshallah, at the end of this month, we'll be having a conference for those that are interested in learning about Islam. The title of the conference is What is Islam All About? So, in this month, we've dedicated it to sharing the stories of our brothers and sisters who have entered the deen, alhamdulillah, and inshallah, this will be a useful, uh, you know, uh, reflections and resource for those that are interested in learning more about Islam to find out what it's like from those that were non-Muslim and they became Muslim. What was their reasons for accepting Islam? What was their experiences? As well as for those of us that were, alhamdulillah, born Muslim. These are important reflections for us because, alhamdulillah, we were born with Islam. But when you hear the stories of those like our sister Alia here, we really get our lives put in perspective. We see how much of a blessing this deen is and what people have to go through in terms of research and different difficulties that they have to go through to find the truth and stick on the truth. So, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Sister Alia. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah
Jazakallah
khairan.
khair. Yes, Jazakallah khair for bringing me on.
Alhamdulillah. So, I think let's begin with kind of your background. So, Sister Alia, what was
Mhm.
your background growing up, culturally, religiously?
So I was actually born in Ukraine. It was still at the time of the Soviet Union. Believe it or not, it was already like kind of the end of it, but nonetheless, it was still the Soviet Union. And I came to America. I was about 10 years old, so I was small, but that chunk of my life in Ukraine kind of did a lot for me in terms of culturing my mind, I guess. And, I used to go back to Ukraine a lot to visit. So I think the mentality was very Ukrainian slash Russian. You can say. And in terms of religion, Ukraine is kind of split between Catholics and Orthodox. So my
Okay.
family is Orthodox Christian. So, kind of the way I look at it, it's very more of like a cultural thing. I wouldn't say it's, like people are religious, so we grew up like, there would be Easter. So we have to go to church, let's say with certain foods. And then the priest would like bless it with holy water. And then like, you put a few candles. There is confession that you have to do, which is really silly. Was subhanAllah one of the things that completely turned me away from Christianity and the church. And so that was kind of, the thing. We were Orthodox Christians, not practicing at all. If anything, we didn't really know much about the religion in itself, just because, like I said, being born at the time of the Soviet Union, religion was kind of forbidden at a certain
Mm,
time there. So, people didn't really, they don't really have much understanding of their own religion, so there was more of growing up in you know cultural home. I think just like any other nationality, may it be Indian or Pakistan or Iraq or whatever. People have their own cultures, and that's kind of how we grow up mainly. So And coming here, it was me and my mom. And I mean, then we had some like family come later down the line also. And it would be the same thing. Like everything that we would do back home, we were kind of just practicing here. Like practicing meaning like comes around Easter time, we all go to church, dress up in the morning, and they just sprinkle the holy water and the food. And but that was, as far as anything went. Yeah, um there was no such thing as like praying together, or nothing like that. If anything, like I had my grandpa um teach me like one of uh, the prayers, like one of the Christian prayers as I was little, but that was the only thing that
Mm.
I ever knew from religion. So
SubhanAllah. So it's like I guess for like a lot of the people that they accept Islam in the US or UK, some places like this, they're more used to like I guess it's a Protestant background or Protestant like branch background, whether they're like Baptists
mm,
or evangelicals, they're coming from that background. So it's like, is there anything specific in Eastern Orthodoxy that makes it like uh, is any specific beliefs that would differentiate it from how Christianity is kind of understood in the US?
so there is, I think, like I, see, I don't have too much knowledge on Protestant and like evangelical, but I think like for Orthodox, they're very big on saints. So like when
Okay,
you
yeah,
go
yeah.
into church, yeah, like
Catholics
extremely
are like
big
that
on
too,
saints.
I
Yeah,
believe.
except I think Catholics, they're more about like the, Mariam,
Mm,
and they're like kind of like more focused on her, and like in Orthodox, they're more focused on Isa alayhi
okay.
salam. So, but they're very big on saints. So like they have saints days and all this stuff. As a matter of fact, like when you go into the church, I mean, it looks very different from like an Orthodox church actually, because you like as soon as you step in there, I think Orthodox, I'm sorry, Catholic, you have like just benches and you just sit there and like you read the Bible. We don't have that in Orthodox Christianity. You kind of just walk into the church and you have a lot of icons like saying this, saying that,
Mm,
and like little candle holders that you can like kind of like just go up and like let's say you go up to icon and like you ask for something, or and do your form of prayer, and then like you kiss it and you like light the candle, and somehow I suppose that's supposed to, I don't know, transfer your prayer to God or something. I'm not even sure like why that ritual kind of is there. But we don't have benches, so you just kind of like walk in there, and then like you hear like the choir kind of in the background. They're singing things from the Bible, and you don't really understand anything except like Hallelujah and like I mean and God
right.
forgive me,
It's
and
in
that's like
Latin,
the
right?
only thing. No,
Or
they sing, and they'll sing in Russian. Um,
mm,
So I mean, it stems from like the Greek Orthodox, I guess. So they would sing it in Russian, So you do
Latin would
catch
be
like phrases, but
Catholic, I believe. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. So but, you never really understand what they're saying. You just feel kind of like, oh, this is different. Like I don't know, perhaps people I suppose they can feel spiritual going in there because this is the most spiritual thing that they'll experience in their life. So yeah, like I think
Mm,
once you go to church, you feel kind of like cleansed or something. But I think that's the main thing is like the focus on Jesus or Isa, and that they say that he's the God, or the all three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is really actually funny because my grandfather, so um, he's like originally from Russia, and like he is of they're called like old believers.
mm,
So it's before like the Orthodox Church got reformed. They used to say the Father and the Son. There was no Holy Spirit at that time. So, but it was kind of like hush hush, back in the day. They couldn't really say much because of communists and, stuff like that. So I guess he was like the most religious person in my life, I suppose. Yeah.
So like your family, it's more ceremonial or like traditional their practices. So for you, when
It's
you were growing up,
been,
like what was your like were you thinking about these big questions about how did I get here? Like, who is God? These types of things. Were
no,
these in your mind as a kid or
no, I don't think so. I mean, the fact that like I knew that there was God, like, or I knew there was a creator, but I never really gave it much thought because there was no discussion like that in the house. And it's not even
Mm,
just my family; it's like the country in general. Like if you take Ukraine and Russia, I think they're about the same in that sense. Like the way they grow up, it's there is a very small amount of people who actually try to be religious, and those people are really kind of like looked down upon, like if
some
you
backwardsness.
yeah, it is. They kind of look at it as like extremism, like, just going to Easter and celebrating Christmas is probably as religious as you can get. Like anything else that you may do beyond that, people look at you kind of like you're wacko, so they're kind of
Mm,
like look down upon that. So, my grandpa would just like mention little things here and there. Like everybody has icons at home. So like again, if you want to make like a little prayer, like asking for something, but I don't remember like anyone in my family doing that. They would just put like little candles, which I never really knew I never understood what that meant. They would just light a candle next to an icon, and
mm,
it's supposed to be some kind of protection or something. Like I have no idea, but no, I never really um never thought about it. I just knew that there was God, and that was it. I was just busy playing outside and no concern for anything else.
subhanallah. You know, this effect you can see it in even some of the predominantly Muslim countries that were ruled by the Soviet Union at one point, like Central
Yes.
Asian countries, where it's like, you have Turkic people there. I mean, atheism
Hmm.
is huge in these regions that were like, really heartlands for Islam. It always really shocks me, like the type of effect that uh, period had on this region. Of course, it
Oh
extended to
yeah.
Muslims in these areas and extended to, I mean, Russia's very Christian type of nation. Now it's like, uh,
By name.
by name, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
they have their own like kind of practice of or their own church, I think, in Russia compared to, Catholicism or Protestantism and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is this thing which is so integral to people, like, the like uh, spiritual questions or like larger questions about how did I get here. It's these are core to people, and with modernity and with the wave of communism, I guess, in this area, it changed these places in a really fundamental way. So
Completely.
yeah. So let's you were living in Ukraine, then you went and moved to the US. So what was the reason for moving to the US?
Um, I don't know. America always seemed like, the it place kind of to say, like
Yeah.
all our movies, everything. We were at a time where everything was being influenced, in terms of media from like the West. So it was like the big dream, the American dream kind of a thing,
The
like
streets are
something to
paved
look
with
up
gold
to.
like Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, money grows on trees. Yeah, exactly. So, in terms anybody coming out from Eastern Europe, they know like it's really tough for them to kind of like make money, support the families. So people would try to do what they can to kind of like travel abroad. Some people just like go and come back constantly. They work, they come back. And me and my mom, we left. She was going to come here for a year to work, and then we ended up staying. So, and that was, a start of a whole new life and chapter, subhanAllah, for both of us.
So how old were you then? Were you like
I was 10. I was not very old, but like I said, those 10 years were like they really formed my brain, and like the way I thought and stuff. And I mean, just like I said, going back home also, kind of reinforced those thoughts and ideas like at that time. So,
I guess that's the age more like people are starting to think more for themselves. They have questions about everything,
mm.
around that middle school kind of teenager type of time in their life. So, what was your first encounter with Islam or with Muslims? You remember that?
So this was not uh, anytime soon after I came. Actually, before I encountered Muslims, the funny thing is, I was like you said, people start having questions, and I did go through a period like that at around
Mm,
like 15, 16. And when I went to seek answers at the church, I did not find what I was looking for at all. So I was completely like turned away from it. And so, and I kept thinking in my head, like, man, I would see my surrounding and environments and just like people in general. And I would always be like, man, there has to be something better than this. And subhanAllah, like, I feel like somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like knowing what's in the heart, He placed me in this situation where I was roommating with one of the girls that I used to go to school with. She was Pakistani, but I never like knew she was Muslim or anything. Like I just she was my friend, and it's like I'm like it's my friend. She's brown. That's really all I know. I don't know anything like too much. Um, so I was living with her, and I think I really believe that this was like the very first um, moment because the things started to change for me, and everything was like kind of a domino effect after this. I was at the house, and I guess her mom had came in, and I didn't like hear her. All I know is that I came out of the bedroom, and like I see her mom in the living room, and there was like no couches. Like the whole living room was just like carpet and stuff.
mm.
And her mom was just sitting in the middle of the living room with like a little rug, you know. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, why is she just sitting there? Like, what is she doing? Like, it's so weird. Like, she has a little rug. Like, what is she doing? So I told my friend, I was like, Sidra, what is she doing? Like, why is she sitting on a little rug? Like, it's so weird. Like, why doesn't she go in a chair? And she's like, she's praying. And I was like, oh, I'm like, okay. It didn't mean anything to me. I was just like, whatever. And then oddly enough, subhanAllah, her mom like finished salah and like she looked at me. She didn't say hi. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me and she said, sometimes the people who convert to Islam become better Muslims than the ones who are like born into Islam. And I was just like, that's such a weird thing to say to me. And I was just like, okay, I'm like, whatever. I just completely like disregarded it. But subhanAllah, somehow that moment like
SubhanAllah.
stayed in my head because I truly believe that that lady probably like made dua for me. And because after that moment in particular, it was like everything was like a domino effect after that. Um, I would say the next thing that happened that's kind of, started to really make me kind of like, wonder about Islam was I was like hanging out with a group of people, and there was like one brother there, and it was just like random because he wasn't like really mingling with us, but he was just kind of there. And then just out of nowhere, he came and he said, um, I really miss like he was just visiting the U.S. from like Dagestan,
Mm.
and he said, I really miss back home, and I miss like Fajr Salah, like, and I looked at him and I was like, what did he just say? Like, what kind of word did he just mumble? I'm like, I looked at him, I was like, what is Fajr? And so he like, subhanAllah, started talking about how, Muslims like get up in the morning and they make wudu and they like get dressed kind of like in a similar clothing. And then like they walk to the mosque and then like men and women go separate. And then like when they pray shoulder to shoulder. And it's just like when he said that like shoulder to shoulder thing, I'd had the craziest goosebumps. And I mean, everything about that, like what he had mentioned I was just so impressed because as he's like saying this, like, like people actually like make the dedication to get up in the morning, and then like they wash up, and then like they dress up and they go, and like men and women go separate, and like just this in itself, I was shocked because then I'm thinking in my head, like, Easter church, like, Eastern, the church. And I'm thinking about, like, when we go there, everybody's dressed up, but like, heavy makeup, really like kind of all types of clothing, gossip. Like
It's
there's
kind of like
nothing,
a
nothing's,
social
yeah,
event.
yes, exactly. And I'm like, subhanAllah, and like even when he's saying like men and women go like and they pray separate, to me, even though I was completely foreign to this idea of like, you know, um not mixing like genders, like to me, like genders, like they always hang out, like, like men, women, they hang out. It was like a normal thing. But like me just hearing the fact that men and women pray separate, I was like, this is great, because I'm like, nobody looks at each other. They're actually focused on their salah. They're actually dedicated to what they're doing. So I think that was like the time that like that seed was planted, like truly, like I really like think so, because after that, like anything else I would hear about Islam, moving forward wherever I was, because later I had like started working at this one like restaurant, and there was a lot of Muslims in there. Like we had Zabiha food, and people would just talk, and I feel like everybody that would come in and talk to me would just like kind of water that little seed, and it would like sprout and sprout and sprout. But I think the initial um thing that kind of started everything was like from my friend's mom, which
Mm.
wallahi I really think it was a dua, because it was like just the oddest thing what she said to me. And then the second thing is like that description of like Fajr Salah, which I just found absolutely phenomenal, so yeah, that was, I think, the first encounter with like, Islam for
SubhanAllah.
me.
SubhanAllah.
Hmm.
There's like it's always an interesting thing to think about, that there's like some people that like eh, we wouldn't even, unfortunately, maybe like we would not think much of them, or like we would like pass pass over them, like they're not somebody I'm interested to getting to know, or somebody who is like really important. But subhanAllah, they're known like in the heavens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could be only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can answer the
Yes,
du'as of any person. Um,
yes,
but it's like that's the effect of dua. It can rarely have that
yeah.
effect. Now there are more like signposts that are pointing you in the direction that it's letting you know more about Islam. It's letting you know more about this deen. So, was there a specific point that you remember that like now you're starting to take it seriously? Now you're starting to think to yourself, "Hey, I really want to go out and learn what is Islam about."
So yeah, when I started working at my old job, like I said, there was a lot of Muslims who came, and subhanallah, like at that point, and I can't remember from where, but I had gotten like some amulets, so I would wear them. Like I think it was like the hand and like something
Mm,
else. But somebody might have
the
given
eye
me
one.
like yeah, the eye, and then somebody I think gave me like a ayah of the Quran that would be in this like little thing, and it was supposed to be as like as protection. Subhanallah, like,
Mm,
now that I look at it, I'm like, it's ridiculous. But, um, subhanAllah, like how things work out, because just me wearing that alone, people would be like, why are you wearing that? I'd be like, oh, for protection and this and this. And so people would like ask me questions, and tell me things. And, um, I found it very intriguing because, yeah, people, I think definitely every group of people that would come in, somebody would always give me dawah. Like they would always tell me something like from Islam, whatever it may be, the stories of the Prophet or something from the Sirah, like something, like I would always get that. And then somebody came and actually gifted me a Quran. And I don't know, I just started reading it,
so until that point,
it
you
was
hadn't
not
read the
like,
Quran. Sorry.
no, no.
Mm,
I would just hear things, and I mean, just because there was Muslims, I knew that there was Ramadan, and like stuff like that. But like somebody gifted me a Quran, and I would, flip it around, and like whenever I wanted to feel some upliftment, I would open it and I would read it, and I'm like, oh man, this like resonates. Like I like this. This like feels good. Like from like my soul feels good. Like right now, And I don't know. I just connected to it. So I was just like, I think I'm a Muslim. Like, I think like I'm really connecting to this. Like when I compare this and to the Bible, I'm like, I feel like, I'm a Muslim. And of course, somebody had taken advantage of that idea, and they were just like, okay, they taught me the Shahada. So I said the Shahada, but like it wasn't at a mosque or anything. They were just like, well, if you feel like a Muslim, this is what you have to say. And so I was like, okay. So I would just like say, and then I learned, okay, there is, Ramadan, so I have to fast. But, funny enough, like I didn't know that there was salah. Like I figured that prayer was du'as, So I would just be like, I would ask like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala something, on my own. I didn't really understand the whole like ritual stuff. And the crazy thing is like there was a lot of I don't want to say like moderate, but I think misguided maybe, or like Muslims who have a lack of understanding of the deen that kind of were we're like, hey, because I started questioning about the hijab at one point, and people were like, no, that's extremism. Like, don't do it. Like those people with the beards and the hijabis, they're like extreme. So like, just stay away from that and just like keep your deen in your heart, and like you don't have to, you don't have to display anything. Just keep it in your heart, and that's it. Just be a good person, And so, coming from my background, and then like because again, like Soviet Union, there and like Russia, and like that influence of ideas of like, because there was the Chechen war. So like the only understanding I have of Muslims, which, is not very clear, is that like there's these crazy people living in the mountains running around killing like Slavs, and, they have beards. And so, that's the only thing that I really understand. So when you have like, somebody who's saying they're a Muslim telling me like, hey, that's extreme. So don't like stay away from that, just keep it like kind of in your heart. And I was like, okay. So I would just, fast Ramadan, and then like again, people at my job would be like, oh, you're a Muslim? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, say the Shahada. So I would say the Shahada, like, I mean, like to me, I'm like, I had more than two witnesses, so I never had like an actual thing where I would be at the masjid, but I had plenty of witnesses of my Shahada, and that's it, so I spent, I think, a good 6 years probably, considering myself a Muslim, yet being kind of scared, or not scared, but like kind of, weary of practicing Muslims. I just thought it was like extreme, and I didn't care to like really get to know them or anything. And subhanAllah, there was an instance. I was driving to work, and it was like it was a warm day. It was either spring or summer, I don't know. But so I was kind of going like this way in the opposite direction, on like, the opposite side there, and we were all at a stoplight. I was at a light, and that brother with his wife, they were in the car, and they were at a light. And I remember this one brother was just like blasting the Quran, and I'm like, I'm faster in Kadzi. And I mean, this thing is like so loud. And I'm like, yeah. And I was just like looking at them, and I'm like, oh my God, I think that's like the extremist people that like, I was told about. I'm like, why does he have to like play the Quran so loud in the car? Like, he shouldn't display it. He should just keep it like down and blah, blah, blah. But I'm just like, again, that moment stuck out to me in my head. And I'm like, now that I look back to it, I'm like, subhanAllah, I'm like, nobody has an issue, or like, nobody is scared or embarrassed to play music or like things that are filled with fitna. But I'm like, that brother, and I'm like, now I look back at that moment, and I'm like, that was truly amazing. I'm like, he didn't care. He just, he was like playing the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, like as loud as it can be, subhanAllah. And I'm like, just so impressed by it now. But when, back then I was just like, oh, it's just literally the thought that I had. I was like, that's probably the extremist that everybody told me about.
I have to ask too, was this a post 9/11 time or not?
Yeah, but you know what? The thing with 9/11, I never had, I actually never thought that Muslims did it. That's the crazy thing. I never thought, even though I was not a Muslim back then, I never believed that it was Muslims who did it. Never,
Right?
never.
SubhanAllah. It was like, I mean,
Hmm.
that's one of the things I would suspect, like, uh, so many people are pushing that kind of modernist or like
No.
non-practicing type of views.
Mm,
I mean, it was there before 9/11, but of course, like with all the propaganda that happened, then it became more in people's faces that they want to kind of swing to the other direction because they don't want to
mm.
uh, be ostracized in society.
Yeah, I think, the people who kind of like influence these thoughts of mine, I think, it's not like they were immigrants themselves, but I think a lot of Muslim countries are also,
Yeah, definitely.
influenced by secular ideas, and like Islam was, I would say anybody who's practicing Islam truly in like in certain countries, I feel like, there was consequences for it. So I think it kind of steered like that generation,
Yeah,
or like my generation of people, from it. And so that's, that's what I was influenced by. So, but 9/11 actually, surprisingly, I was, while everybody was screaming like Arabs and this, I was just like, nope, like it's not them. So,
subhanallah. Was it like you had like Muslims around you, but they were kind of like on that path that they were like saying, "Oh, you should just keep your religion to yourself. You should keep your deen to yourself. Don't do
yeah,
things."
so that was the main thing, and like I said, it took me about 6 years, but then like we started getting practicing Muslims at my job that would come and eat, and I would always be like, oh, like
Mm,
but then like they also saw like my little amulets, and so there was questions that came about like, oh, are you Muslim or something? And I'm like, yes, and then so and I learned like little phrases, Alhamdulillah, and obviously all this stuff, and um so they asked me about Salah, and I was just like, yeah, I pray, but I'm like referring to dua and stuff, and I'm telling them, and they're like, that's not what Salah is. They're like, you don't know what Salah is? And I'm like, no, like what? So, subhanAllah, this group of people actually, alhamdulillah, they referred me to a lot of good information. First of all, they introduced me to tafsir, which I had no idea about. Um, they introduced me to hadiths. I started listening to lectures. They like said like listen to this and this, and like it was really crazy because like subhanallah, I think within a span of a month, two at most, I put on the hijab, and I think during that time frame I was like learning how to pray and stuff, and I was like, yeah, I need to figure this out. And yeah, it just happened really, really quickly once I got my
subhanallah.
hands on that information.
You're starting to pray, and now you're wearing like hijab. You're kind of showing and practicing, of course, the deen. Did you get any like what was it like for your friends and family now that you're seeing you do this? I guess before that, right? Like, did you tell your family that you had accepted Islam? Like, I didn't even ask
Yeah,
that.
I was
So,
like a
what
Muslim,
was
and they're
their?
like, yeah, okay, because I was still there at Christmas and all the other holidays, So
Mm,
I'm still doing everything that I was doing with them. Like, there's nothing, you know. I was still like kind of like holding hands, saying "Kumbaya," basically, but uh, they took it as a phase. They were like, yeah, okay, whatever. She's going through a phase. They didn't take it seriously,
okay.
But once I put on my hijab, that was a completely different story. I had some of my family, they had turned away from me. Subhanallah, which is like crazy. They were like, you drew completely a line between us and you. And then they called me all types of names, and they said I was brainwashed, and um, all this stuff. And my mom really freaked out, which is funny because she's a Muslim now, subhanAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, but she was freaked out. She was just like, do not come to my house wearing hijab, skirts, dresses, nothing. She was just like, no way. Oh yeah, she was really scared because again, like, we just hear horror stories about Muslims, So, she's thinking like, I'm over here about to like ruin my life. And yeah, it was kind of like a tough moment, I would say. Some, I think friends like back home, for example, they're just, I went from being, because they give like nicknames and stuff. So I went from being the American to being a Shahid. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that nickname. I was like, inshallah, that's what's meant for me, Um, so they didn't really care. People here, I think in terms of friends, like I never had like anything like really very stable just because me and my mom, we moved around a lot. So, and on top of that, at that point, I had really, whatever friends I did make, I really put a distance between myself and them because I just, I wasn't like happy in the environment that I was in. I was not, I knew I wanted a change and, I had distanced myself from a lot of people. So, like, in terms of friends, I don't think anything mattered. I mean, like, I got a lot of reactions at my work. People were really like, whoa. A lot of people were excited. Some people, yeah, subhanAllah, kind of like weirded out by it a little bit because, there was a lot of different like types of Muslims that would come to my job. So like, sometimes, and this is something that I want to go into a little bit later, that um, Muslims need to understand that they're carrying dawah, whether they're trying to do it deliberately or not, So because like people like would do, like, when they didn't know, I was like, kind of like in the deen, really, they were just like, ah, whatever, she's just fast. You would see a lot of stuff happening, but then like once I put in a hijab, people were like, oh, okay, hold on, something's happening here. This is different. Like, so they just like kind of change suits and stuff, you can say. But yeah, I got a lot of positive reaction at work. I think from a lot of Muslims, people are just like really excited, happy. But in terms of family, it was yeah, my family thought it was brainwashed and not a not a very pleasant experience at that time. But for me, on my end, I think a big plus for myself was that I was not living with my mom or anything like that. I was living separate, so I didn't have that threat of being kicked out of the home.
Yeah.
So but because I know a lot of Muslims who their parents threaten them with that like immediately. So alhamdulillah, like at least for me, I didn't have that pressure. And I had the freedom to kind of like do what I wanted, like, you know, um,
So,
like putting a
alhamdulillah.
hijab and stuff. Yeah.
So now that first year after you're starting to practice and everything like that, is that kind of a
Yep.
gradual process
Alhamdulillah.
for people to kind of understand that, hey,
It just,
this is you now? Like, or did it
um,
take a bit longer?
no, I think it was very quickly. I mean, like my family was just shocked at the amount of change that happened. Um, and probably even at work, some people, I just remember because I think probably within, no, that was a couple of years down. But that first year, I think, was awesome. And the first couple of years, I think your brain yearns for so much because you understand whatever you just learned is like a drop in the ocean. So
Mm,
you're like, okay, I need much, much more of this. So I just spent that whole year, like, just kind of, you know, researching, reading, listening, learning. And that was my, like, I think my first year, like, for me, I was just on cloud nine. I loved it.
subhanallah.
It was great. Yeah. Like, regardless of what, like, my family like or didn't like, I felt amazing and I was so happy. And I was like, man, why didn't this is like, you know, I became like a person who I was like scared of. Like, if I take myself like right now and me, like, let's say like 20 years ago, I would be like, oh, she's an extremist. So,
Yeah, there's like
yeah.
it's such an amazing thing, especially when like you're not really thinking or you don't know like how deep like the Islamic sciences would go, or like
Hmm.
much there is to how much there is to learn about the deen. I mean, it really is like
Yeah.
even somebody who's like been studying for a long time, they'll tell us like exactly the same thing, right? It still feels like it's
Yes.
just a drop in the ocean.
Yes. SubhanAllah. Yep. But yeah, I think my first year I was just really, really indulged and like memorizing like surahs and like stuff like that. A lot of learning, a lot. Yeah.
So, uh, one of the things is like you were saying before, um, you know, for your family to basically understand and try to basically the even though there's a little bit of you know some roughness in the beginning, some conflict maybe, then they started to come around. Um, you're like you're saying your character and the way that you interact with people, the way you carry yourself, that has such a big effect on people, has such a big effect on showing the effects of the deen, the effects of iman on a person. So this is uh like very key, I guess, for building that relationship with family and stuff like that after.
hmm Yeah, you have to be very patient because I mean, like I think um, for anybody who's a convert, like they just have to know that, like because you just like end up learning so much stuff, and you get excited, and you're like, oh, I want my family to be on the same page, but they're gonna be, just remember, like Allah removed the curtain from your eyes, not theirs.
Mhm.
So you still have to be like very patient, and just kind of be prepared to hear, you know, like that you're brainwashed, or like, are you sure you don't want to come back to us, and like stuff like that. Because I mean, like my family, like eventually they were just like, okay, this is her thing, as long as we don't see her. I don't know, for some reason there's this crazy idea that I'm going to be sold into some kind of slavery. Okay. So they're like, as long as we're not like seeing this, or like I'm going to be beat up, or something, like you hear horror stories of
Mhm.
like I said, of Muslims back home. So for them, they were just like, all right, she's just doing her thing. They're like, we have to accept her. But like, the funny thing is, like, they would still ask me to, like, let's say, engage in certain things, and I'm like, no, I can't do that, I'm a Muslim, like, and they're just like, they like, for a very long time they still didn't take it very seriously. And I think now, I think me getting married actually played a big impact on that, for them to take me seriously or not, because I think once they like also like saw my husband, that played a big role, because when you're like kind of like the baby in the family, everybody's just like, whatever, they kind of, dismiss you and stuff. But I think as time went by, and then like once I got married, really, they were just like, okay, this is not going to go away. It's not a phase. It's real. And they do this and they don't do this. So,
Mm.
yeah.
These last 3 points, I feel like we can talk about them. Advice for new
Yeah.
Muslims, advice for people giving dawah, thoughts on Muslim
Mhm.
communities in the US before.
I guess we can start with like the advice for new Muslims.
Okay.
There, like there's several really. I have no, number one would be to study, learn, study the Sirah. Very, very important, like in depth, study the Sirah, because you may see a lot of things in the communities that may throw you off or whatever. And just remember, like, if you study the Sirah and look at the early Muslims and how the Prophet ﷺ did things, you'll know that the problems, for like the solution for the problems in our ummah is there. So that's the main important thing, is definitely Sirah as number one. Number two, well, other than the Quran, of course. Sorry, but double check your sources. You may have people tell you A, B, C, and D. Always go back and make sure that the dalil, like if it's something that's strong evidence or weak evidence. I think this is very, very important, because, like, for me myself, I spend a lot of years like believing something was, a strong hadith, for example, when in fact it was not. So I think this is very important. I would say change your environment and surround yourself with people who will help you, excel in your deen. Um, because if you don't want to paddle backwards, this is the way forward. Basically, surround yourself with like-minded people. And I think definitely don't give up. You may have moments, like I said, not everybody's story is very linear. Sometimes, some, reverts may slip up or whatever. Don't ever get discouraged and think like, okay, that's it. It's over for me. I can't, this is, too strict for me. Like, just keep going. You mess up, ask for forgiveness, keep going, like learn more,
Mm.
and I think, it's very important, like with the learning aspect. The reason that was the first thing that I said was because I always think about the Sahaba who would like get sent to different places to give dawah, and they would be like a one-man army basically. So I think it's very important, as a revert, right, like to get yourself to a point where if you find yourself in a situation where you do not have a community around you, or you don't have those people who will, like, help you and support you, you need to be able to hold your feet on the ground by yourself. And the only way to do that is through knowledge. So I think this is very, very important. Be ready to, like, if you're ever in a situation where you don't have anybody else around you, that you're strong enough, and the only way to be strong is through knowledge, where you can continue moving forward, and just having strong faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. um you know
Yeah,
Inshallah.
definitely.
Yeah.
It's like there's uh, there's some things I've heard from some people that have accepted Islam. It's mashallah, it's all like really good advice. It's there's a lot. I think connecting yourself with like the rooted tradition, seeking knowledge is definitely key. That goes for everybody, whether they accepted Islam or whether they are already Muslim and now kind of they're turning back towards
Hmm.
Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. This is very key. It's basics like the line knowledge, what you need to do for your everyday life as Muslim, like things related to ibadah, things related to transactions, way you interact with people, um, self reflection. These are all very key. These are foundations. And then
Yes.
um, another thing is kind of we're living obviously in if you're living in the U.S., if you're listening from the U.S., I suppose you are. But this is a non-Muslim country. It's a non-Muslim area. Muslims are 1% of the population. So I think it's also like beneficial, like after you've started to like learn the Deen and you're practicing, and you're being consistent on it, you're building yourself. Then uh, you should I don't know, it's always like a learning journey, but like of course we're seeing all of these things that are going on around the Muslim world. So try to understand these things. Try to kind of connect yourself with a larger global ummah. Of course, it's important to be involved in your community as well. I mean, in the sense of like a worldview. This is also
Mm.
important. I'd say uh, understanding your deen so that you're able to practice it in like a rooted way, and then also understanding kind of that Islamic worldview. These are two important
Yeah.
things. After, of course, like
Exactly.
Aqidah points.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so how about sister? Before we head out, or
Mm-hmm.
or conclude here, what advice would you give for people that are making dawah, people that know somebody who's interested in Islam? How should they call them to the din?
In the most beautiful way. I think when you're giving dawah, and that can mean a lot of things too. I would say, like, be truthful, and um, I would say, like, don't give up on people. Definitely don't give up, because, for some people, like, they may come to the deen right away. Some people may, you know, fall and fall and fall and fall, but like, just don't give up. If like, something has planted in their heart, just don't, like, that little seed of Islam has planted in their heart, don't give up on them. They, for whatever reason, like, their background may be, causing them to still behave this way or that way. Just, you don't have to, like, for example, like, I know some people that, um, went through a whole journey of like not practicing to becoming actually very practicing Muslims, but it took time. So just like don't give up on people. Most definitely, I think, you know, um, just like for me, it happened where somebody planted a seed. Maybe you're going to be the person who plants the seed. Maybe you're going to be the person who waters that seed. You have to kind of assess the situation. I think that's another important thing is like you have to kind of like read the situation, the person, and because you can't be too pushy either, right? Like sometimes you can just go completely in and like just lay everything out on the table, and sometimes you have to just like gradually like drop these little like subtle things, like and pieces of information for it to like cook in the brain. So you have to just kind of like assess the situation, and but just don't give up, and at the very least make dua for a person, that Allah guides them. Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah, it can be a bit like counting people out is the easy way out. Like
Hmm.
saying giving up on people is
Yeah.
that's not really fun. What are your thoughts on like as a reverse somebody who's accepted Islam, some masajid, not all masajid, but we know that there are some masajid that kind of become like a cultural centers. The khutbah is only given in one language, whether it's Urdu or it's Arabic or whatever.
Yeah.
It can be uh difficult for somebody who's like, you know, converts are coming from all different types of backgrounds. Some may know
Yeah.
Muslims and they have like, kind of a support network. Some may just be kicked out of their homes and they're by themselves now. Right. So whether uh, really anybody who's trying to get on their deen, one of the things can really help them is going to the masjid and in kind of being in that masjid community, in that Islamic community that's there. It's going to be difficult to do that if you're not able to talk to the people there, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Um, so I've seen a mixture of things really. I think there's just like such a large variety. I mean, like I think
Mm,
in general you can find people who are very supportive and everything, but there's also cases where for example, there was a case that I knew that like somebody accepted Islam, the community embraced them, the person messed up, and the whole community dropped that person.
mm,
So there was an instance like that. There's instances I've heard of like, the people get embraced into the community right away and they just have full support. And then like for me, for example, like when I, started practicing Islam and stuff, like I used to go to Eid Salah like by myself, and people would like come to my job and they're like, oh, what did you do today? And I'm like, I don't know, I work. Like I, I don't have anybody to celebrate Eid with, for example, and nobody would offer. They were like, oh, okay, whatever, nobody um, you know, really gave it much thought. So I think it's just like a very big variety. There is one masjid, they have a whole like program kind of for converts. I don't know if it's programs, but like, they do have like a convert group, which I think it's great for somebody who's starting out, um, but if you feel yourself like stagnant or something, you'll always have to like kind of see where else you can find like more information and stuff. Because I feel like, for example, I don't want to name the masjid, but like the convert group that's there, I feel like it's very stagnant. Unfortunately, they don't really help them move forward. They're
mm,
at a very basic level, subhanallah. And I feel like, the reason I exited like that group, for example, is like they were teaching a lot of like secular kind of ideas in terms of like encouraging like voting and stuff, which I think is very, uh, disappointing really, because they're pushing like certain ideas on new Muslims, which I found to be really strange. And like, I wasn't really able to speak out. Like my comments started getting deleted. So I think, you know, um, it depends. Like, let's say if you join that group as a like, first like brand new Muslim, it's great because like they'll give you resources, they'll give you like books. There's maybe like programs, like you may get like help in that. But um, yeah,
yeah. It's
And I think it's the only masjid that I've seen so far that actually had something for converts, which is also nice. But then I'm like, it's like a double edged sword, because I'm like, there is like khair in it, but then on the other hand, like you find them, pushing certain ideas, which I was like, I found it really weird. But in general, I think like in terms of community, I think it can just go so many ways. There's people who found that support. There's people who did not find that support. There's people who got the support and then just got dropped, in a second. So there's just, a lot of stuff. That's why I say it's really important to gain the knowledge. And if like you're in a position where you have to be like a one-man army for a little bit, like make sure you get yourself there. Like know
yeah,
why you're
yeah.
accepting the deen. Like what's the
Mm-hmm.
point of you coming to Islam? Because you may see a lot of things in the community that's, is going to be a very wide range, basically, of
And look, on Yom Al Qiyamah, and all of us will be standing, like, for our own selves. We won't be standing for any group that we're part of, any like family, tribe, etc. It's I like that phrase you're using, like a one man army, because like
Mhm.
with the Sahaba, we have like the beautiful examples that these were people that you know they had to go through, like the toughest trials to
Right.
preserve their deen. With the Muhajirin, I mean, and the Ansar as well. I mean, it was not easy for them as soon as they went to like Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came to Medina. It was not easy for them, even though now this is Muslims that are in charge over here. It's uh, you know the person themselves, they have to build themselves up. I was listening to one sheikh. He accepted Islam, Sheikh Mahdi Allah, and he said something interesting, that he noticed some converts, like after 8-10 years after accepting Islam, alhamdulillah, they accepted Islam, but after 8-10 years, he said that you cannot really call yourself like a new Muslim anymore. This is a long
Mm.
time. So at that point, like you have to think about situation that you're in. Even among, like born Muslims, I feel like there's equivalence there with some people, that they the only thing that they've learned from Islam is what they're taught by their parents, which is great. No, it takes them a long way, right? But afterwards, it's not, the deen should not just be something which is you learned it when you're a kid and you teach, like your kids some things, and there's no progression or development of yourself, like in improving yourself in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from after 7 years old. We have our whole lives out of us. So we have to prepare for that day that we'll stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a useful advice, I
Inshallah,
feel, just in general. Like,
inshallah, inshallah. Yeah, I think it's very very important seeking the knowledge. And in terms of progression, I think, yeah, even for born Muslims, I think it's important to understand that there's a lot more to the deen than the rituals of it. It covers, if we're saying that Islam is a way of life, and it covers from A to Z, aspects, then you need to know that there is a lot more than just salah and maswak and
there's a few more letters after ABC. So,
yes, yes,
all right.
yes, exactly. Inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Alia, for taking out the time, for sharing your story, your experiences. Inshallah, it's beneficial. Those of you that are interested in
Inshallah.
Islam, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide you to the truth. Alhamdulillah, has guided so many others. We hope that if you're interested in Islam, or if you are interested in just in dawah in general, that you will attend the conference at the end of the month, Saturday, November 30th. Until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve us all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and increase us in beneficial knowledge. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
لا لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر. لا 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 لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر. صبح بدا نور ظهر، نجم وشمس وقمر، ألقى على الدنيا الدرر. هذا عمر، هذا عمر، كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر. هذا عمر، هذا عمر. لا، لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح. نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر. لا لا